I'd like to welcome you to a special presentation. It's a part of our self-empowerment series. This particular program deals with the tens of millions of Americans, actually hundreds of millions of individuals who suffer from some form of addictive behavior. Whether it's the 131 million overweight Americans or the more than 100 million Americans who've smoked, or over 250 million Americans who seem to be addicted to sugar, throw in all the people who gamble, the people who drink, the people who take coffee, drugs, and who are workaholics, and you start to realize that many people suffer from many different of these conditions. Our program is called the 13th Step. Why? It is not to suggest that the 12 steps have not benefited people. Clearly they have. But based upon my own experience of having individuals in my own extended family who have had problems in all these different areas, and seeing their efforts of trying to rebalance their lives, and more often than not, the futility of it. And recently, one particular group down in Florida that is a halfway house for people who are trying to get back into society and recover. They've been to jail, or they've had broken marriages or lost their jobs. They've been alcoholics, or they've been gamblers. Whatever their behavior, they've been in trouble. And part of what they're trying to do is to be able to maintain a life that gives them joy and happiness. Knowing many of these people, I started to realize that the absence of a particular behavior does not mean that a person is happy, well. How many times have we had someone say, well, I no longer drink, but they drink coffee, or they eat sugar, or they smoke? I remember once going to a AA meeting with a member of my family, and I watched people smoke more cigarettes, drink more coffee, down more sugar, and were really just underneath the surface, rageful. And I'm thinking a program that's supposed to help people recover should also help that spiritual recovery. Now you talk about it, all the programs that have a spiritual component, and they should. But what happens when we want something, we try for it, and we don't get it? Then maybe we should re-examine where we're at. So the purpose of what we're going to try to do is look at life a little differently. First, I don't believe that anyone has a disease. I believe that's one of medicine's way of trying to pathologize conditions, that because so many people are afflicted, that we're saying that it is something beyond their control. How many times we've heard alcoholism's a disease, and now they want to make being overweight a disease, because once you make it a disease, you've pathologized it, then you have certain criteria that will diagnose it, and of course, medications to treat it. I don't believe there are medications for the spirit or the mind. I don't believe that there even should be considered medications for inappropriate choices in life. I believe we must start by asking ourselves a series of questions to which you will have your own answers. I'm merely going to give you some suggestions, but mind you, these are merely suggestions. It doesn't mean that they're the beginning and end of what you should believe, just to make you think. For example, all crises show us what we've avoided. Now think of that for a moment. How many times in a crisis, the crisis where you have a heart attack, you have a stroke, you end up one day, you're diagnosed with diabetes. That's a crisis. And you wouldn't have had that crisis had you not avoided a lot. Right? What if we avoid our happiness? What if we avoid our relationships, our body, our mind, our spirit, our finances, growing old, losing a job, losing a loved one, death of a friend or family member, facing retirement? What if we've avoided our own growth, emotional growth, intellectual growth, creative growth? What if we've lived so much of our lives in very controlled standards, almost routine? Every day we do the same thing over and over again, and yet we expect a different outcome. How in the world can you live a life where you don't break the routines and break the habits and expect something to be fundamentally different? Well, what's not going to be different is how you feel, because you've given yourself nothing to rebalance what was out of balance. Disease just doesn't happen in the vast majority of cases. Disease is not genetic. Even when genes may play some role, it is the milieu in which the gene exists. So if I'm spending more than what I'm making, if I'm not able to save, if I feel that I have to have everything that comes along, then one day I'm out of balance financially. Now I may have things, and think of that. I have things I've made significant, but they're not. I've given them a value they shouldn't have. I've given them an emotional value. Oh, I need that car, I need that, and it's just a thing. That's all it is. Your life is more significant than anything you own, anything you possess, anything. Well, then comes the imbalance. You get something, you pay for it. Now, your money goes down and the anxiety level goes up, because there must be compensation, and the average person compensates with stress. How many times do you see people, even here in New York City, we're filming in New York City, how many people living right here in New York City get up every day, go to work at jobs that may not honor them, but pay the rent, come back to an apartment that's really not a home. It's a place to live, but there's nothing that's warm and wonderful about it. It's a point of transition. But we never get beyond where we can just pay our bills. And yet then we lose the joy of living in a wonderful city, because New York's a wonderful city if you can afford it. And if you can't, then you're not going to the Broadway shows, and you're not going to a lot of the concerts, because a lot of the stuff New York offers costs. Some things don't. But then when was the last time you went to the Botanical Gardens in Brooklyn, or the Bronx Zoo, or the Cloisters? Really wonderful places that are unique in this country, that give this place its livability. More often than not, in downtime, people are so exhausted from the kind of work they've done that they kind of veg out or hang out with friends. So everything then is kind of a postponement to the when, if. Well, when I finally get financially secure, or when I find the right relationship, when I feel good enough, when I get my health back, when I have enough, money, when I have some friends, then I also, in other words, you're allowing your life to be put on hold until something out here is achieved. Then you will live the life that you feel you were meant to live. Does that ever happen? I know people that make a lot of money, and still it's not enough for them to create the schedule that gives them the freedom, because they feel almost indispensable in life. Well, I got to be there. Why? Why? What value is it if without you, nothing works? One of the more humbling experiences of life is realizing that life will go on without any of us. Think of all the great and wonderful contributors to our existence, whether it's Muhammad or Christ or Moses or Buddha or Abraham or Spinoza or Gandhi or Martin Luther King. They all made a contribution, valuable, but they're all dead. Life goes on. Well, when did we realize that maybe we should appreciate the day we're in and take ourselves away from a scene for a moment and say, well, okay, I felt I had to keep working every single moment of every single day and always responsible for everyone else. Stop for a moment and see what happens. Life goes on. Sun's going to rise, people are going to go to work, and in the blink of an eye in universal time, we can be forgotten. And I think gnawing away at many of us is this idea of the impermanence of life, the impermanence of our youth, the impermanence of our relationship, the impermanence of our culture. My generation, the baby boomers, we grew up where our family believed in permanence. Those of us who had family that went through the Great Depression, they had so little, so they didn't believe in waste. They believe in hand-me-downs and eat what's on your plate. You realize they would say, there was a time when we didn't have food like this. We might go 2 days without eating, and they live with that. My generation, we've had everything. We've done it all, experienced it all, And then you stop and say, well, gee, you're kind of burnt out then, aren't you? And what you're seeing in America today is an awful lot of people who spend all their time on their family, all their time on their career, all their time on their success, creating something that is permanent, and they wake up in their 40s, 50s, and think, whoa, where do I go now? What do I do? I've done everything else that was supposed to give me happiness and fulfillment and my sense of self. We're so committed to our careers that by the time we're 25 or 24, 23 out of college, we don't stick our head up in the air to look around us at the world until we finally achieve something 10, 15 years later, till we finally feel secure enough. And by the time we stick our head up to look at the world around us, to actually experience life, to allow ourselves to be inclusive of life, to be open to other cultures and people and places and things without trying to dominate it or correct it, just being present for life. Do you know what it's like to wake up and be present for a person of another race, present a person of another religion, and to look at that person from love, not fear, inclusion, not exclusion? It suddenly makes us feel, where have I been? It's easy to be an intellectual spectator, one who listens to radio, even hip radio, even progressive radio, reads a progressive book, watches a progressive television program. We disguise frequently how out of balance we are by what we associate with. If I associate with a progressive cause, I must be progressive. No, not at all. How many times have we seen people who should be smarter than the choices they've made? How many people, whether it's conservative or liberal, really do dumb things? They also get overweight, and they get cancer, and they smoke, or they drink, or they don't stop and smell the roses. Well then, how smart are they if they're not smart about their own life? I know people can tell you everything about molecules and atoms and nanotechnology, and who don't spend 5 minutes with their children. They take care of their children, but not unconditional time. Just go to any resort in the world and watch how often people are sitting there at the beach with a cell phone. Is there something wrong with that picture? Yeah. It's out of balance. And without balance, the only thing that's going to happen when you don't have balance in your life is what? What?
Imbalance.
Imbalance leads to what?
Disease.
Conflict. Conflict leads to what? Disharmony. Disharmony is distress. Distress is disease. So just follow the chain of being out of balance to creating conflict from out of balance. Because if you can't pay your bills, the first thing you feel is what? Stress. And how do you stress yourself? What do you do when you feel stressed and you can't change what's stressing you? What do? You sublimate. And how do you sublimate? How have you sublimated? When there's something in your life you just can't cope with, something you can't change, where you feel disempowered, what do you do then? Food. Shop. Drugs. Eat. What? Chronic masturbation. We'll have to start a 12-step program about that. Think of all the ways that we keep ourselves busy. And what are we doing? Why do we sublimate? Why?
To escape.
To escape what?
The problem.
The problem. But what if the real problem is not the drug? See, in a lot of the 12-step programs, people get up and say, I'm an alcoholic. I've been an alcoholic for 13 years, and I've been clean and sober for 6 months, and I hurt this, and I did this, and I was stupid this, and everybody goes, very good, very good. I'm saying that the drugs, the alcohol, the gambling, the overeating, the obesity, I'm saying those are merely symptoms, not causes. I'm saying we shouldn't focus on that. We should focus upon what is imbalanced in the person, because if you see what's imbalanced, and you see what led to their stress, which led to their feeling of helplessness, which led to their incapacity to deal with something more constructively. So it's not a disease, it's not a pathology, it's an inappropriate behavior. It's the wrong choice. How many times in your life have you thought back and thought, God, why did I close that door? Think of what you left behind with the choices that you've made. We've all done that many, many times. If only I hadn't said what I said. If only I hadn't done what I did. But you did. You can't change it. What you can do is not repeat it. Learn from it. And learn that the inappropriate choices you make are what creates the imbalance. The inappropriate choice to eat what you shouldn't have, to spend what you shouldn't have. If you know that an inappropriate choice in a relationship is not to communicate, then not communicating is going to get you what? What you fear. So what you fear is abandonment is going to happen, because at some point someone's going to say, hey, if you can't communicate, then we got nothing to share. So then embrace the problem. The problem is not out there. The problem is not who you've hurt. The problem is not hurting yourself. That's merely the end stage of a disease process that is the liver's disease, the brain's been hurt, but the underlying cause is not a disease. The underlying cause is inappropriate choices. Now that leads us to the idea that all these crises that leads us to inappropriate choices are preventable, every single one, if we know what to do. How often do you think you choose your crisis? Most of the times, right? But we don't want to acknowledge that, because what would happen if we had to acknowledge that we create our crisis? Then you got to take responsibility. And if you take responsibility, then what happens?
Guilt.
Well, you could feel guilt or shame, but you could also feel good about the fact that you're honest with yourself and realize that's not a choice that's going to get me where I want to go. So why not pay attention to the choices that get you where you want to go, right? Just think for a moment, where do you want? What do you want? Where do you want to be? What do you want to feel? Then that's all that you should put your energy in, because that's balancing. If I want to feel good, if I want to feel love, if I want to feel anything, I can't give what I don't have. No one can. That's why we have so few people who are willing to be unconditionally loving, open to a stranger, open to the world, open to what they don't know, instead of rigid and closed to what they don't know, fearful of what they don't know, intimidated by what they don't know. But if I feel unconditional love, and if I know how to hold that unconditional love in this moment and stay present with it, then I can't make judgments against other people. I have to look at everything with love instead of critical disdain. Now think what that would do if people were in conflict, look at each other with love instead of hate. When you look at someone with love, even people that have hurt you, people who've denied you, people that have been against you, what happens when you look at them with love? What?
They're just another being.
You see in them what you would want to see in yourself. Because everyone who's ever committed a bad act could also create a good act. We're all fully capable of being the best we can be. But if you're not willing to be the best you can be, then what you haven't discovered in yourself, how are you going to give it to someone else? So I've got to find my love before I can give it. And I've got to find my love before I can find it in someone else, see it in other people. So we're simply a lot of people walking around very frustrated. That's why we are sublimating. And we're drawn to people like us who may be in search also, but you really need to open yourself up and say, gee, I haven't found it because I haven't looked in the right place. If you're just looking in the emotions, you're not going to find it. You can cry all you want. You can confess all you want. It doesn't mean you're going to change anything. How many times have you heard people really get angry at themselves and apologetic, and everybody says, okay, never again, they say, and then they do it again. You know people like that? Been one of those people? I'm not going to do this again, and then you do it again. That's because you never surrendered that. You never touched that deeper self. In an absence of crisis, what do you pay attention to and what do you change? When there's no crisis in your life, what do you change? Nothing. Because now what you're doing, you're trying to stay safe. How do we stay safe?
Don't do anything.
Well, do only what you know the outcome of. Stay in predictable patterns. Eat the same food. Today I was in a health food store and I was standing beside a woman. I was near a deli and I was looking at all these wonderful gourmet vegan dishes they had. And a woman comes in, she looks and says, "There's nothing to eat here." And the woman behind the counter says, "We got 30 entrees and got a whole salad bar." "Well, you don't have what I wanted. You've thrown everything good away. I can't shop here anymore." And the woman says, "But ma'am, I'll give you one of these dishes, free, to try." No. So she went up and as she was leaving, I says, "Miss, I have a question for you. Why, with all those foods there, didn't you have any interest in anything that was gourmet, vegan, organic, living foods?" And the answer was simple. I don't like change. Now, the food that was there before, I know for a fact was boring. They hadn't changed a single item in 7 years. It was tasteless. It looked terrible. Everything looked like, mud balls. And yet that was okay. But get something new, better, healthier. And she didn't want it. We're afraid of change. How often do you fear people who ask change? How often when we have an opportunity for change, we stop. We're afraid of what would happen if we really became our real self, where you might not know what the outcome would be. When you go to a deeper level of self and you're relating with the authentic self, you don't know what the outcome is going to be, right? But if you keep doing the same thing every day, you at least know what the outcome might be, or you hope to know what the outcome is. If you keep your hair the same style, the same clothes, eat the same food, you try not to have change. We're a society of gated communities. We're a society of barriers. We exclude people who are not like us. We only try to include people who are like us. That's not, where's the change? Where's the growth? Where's the balance? There's no balance in that. When everything is the same all the time, there's no balance. You're going to become imbalanced because of all the things you're avoiding and denying. It's like watching a person that will eat a vegetarian diet but won't exercise, or a person that exercises vigorously but won't take their supplements. A person that takes their supplements but won't meditate. A person who meditates but won't juice. A person that juices every day, taking their wheatgrass juice, but doesn't exercise, take their vitamins, meditate, because they think, oh, my answer's in my juice or my meditation. No, it's the totality of life. And almost always we lose our balance when we're not connected to the larger life. We become too small in our life. So sometimes it's only through a crisis that we change. It shouldn't be that way, because you can't always control the outcome of a crisis. One of the reasons that we resist change is the fear that the human resources needed to deal with change we simply don't have. How many times in life have you not done something because you just felt, I don't have the capability of it. I don't have the tools to do it. And then most people back off. And the older you get, the more likely it is that you're going to suggest to yourself, every time you have an opportunity to change it, you can't. Because you just don't have the money or the knowledge or the connections. It's kind of interesting. I believe there are two people in this world who make things happen: policymakers and opinion leaders. They are in the tiny minority of society. Probably in our society, you might be looking at maybe 6 million people out of 290 million people. That's a very small percentage. About, what is that? About 2%, a little less. But recently I was at a dinner party, and all the people at that dinner party, though they didn't know each other, had one thing in common. They were all successful at being highly motivated individuals. Within an hour of being there, it was just amazing the networking that was going on. How many people wanted to do things together, making deals with people. All I heard all around me was, oh, I do this, you do that, well, we could do something. And everybody wanted to work together because they all had something in common. They weren't afraid of ideas. They weren't afraid of change. They weren't afraid of taking chances. They weren't afraid of how much as a human being they could experience and explore. And all night long, that's all I saw. deals being made, doors being opened, because it's only policymakers and opinion leaders who are the primary door openers in life. They're the ones who allow someone to go from where they're at to where they need to be. Average people can't do that for you. They can appreciate you, they can open doors. These people can. And then when you get to know these people, you realize how simple they are. They're very uncomplicated. Problem, solution. That's how they live. They're always in the solution. Almost everything they do is solution. The average person, however, is where? Problem. All they do is talk about the problems. Well, if all you can do is talk about problems and whine, moan, complain, or feel helpless, and you don't have the tools, so how can you change? How can you be healthy? You're not going to. And that's when, again, you sublimate your sense of helplessness. But as a society, we frequently avoid the very courses, the very classes, the very tutoring, the very much input that we need to feel more complete, to be enough, to do enough in our life to feel free of being burdened by fear and insecurity. Hope you've enjoyed it. We'll continue next week. I'll see you then.